Dear students, welcome to the fourth information video about the Industrial Revolution. Now that we know the cause for why the first factories were built, we are going to look at the consequences. In this video, we will look at the consequences of the circumstances of the factory workers. So why was their life so bad? Who caused it? Who made a profit out of it? Etc., etc. But first, something completely different. You are probably sometimes wondering why you have to go to school and why it's mandatory. And maybe sometimes you also complain about your busy schedule. The rule that every student in the Netherlands has to go to school is something every child has the right to. It's actually something you should be very happy with. I know it doesn't feel like that every day, but you should, because there's still students or children who aren't able to go to school. To understand this, we are going to look at the living and working conditions of children that lived in the 19th century, because this is when they came up with these rules. Here you can see a picture with two children who are about the same age as you have right now, if you are right now. They didn't have a choice to go to school because they had to start working at a very young age. They needed to earn money because there wasn't enough money at home to survive. Only the children with very, very rich parents didn't have to work the rest of their life and could go to school. Because they had a better chance at a good education, they also had a better chance for a good job. On this picture, you again see two children working in a printing house. So imagine having to work from about 7 years old until the day you die. And that was probably a lot sooner than you guys will die. Work in the factories was very hard and dangerous, especially for these young kids. They would spend hours doing the same dangerous job, sometimes without a break, 12 hours a day. There was a big chance that an accident would happen. And working those big machines was very dangerous. There wasn't a lot of fresh air, but a lot of polluted air. And because of that, there was a big chance you would become ill. In our time, we don't find this normal. So how is it possible that they did in the 19th century? What are the causes of child labor and the bad working conditions for the factory workers? Why did the people or the parents send their children to work each day knowing that it was very dangerous? The reason they did this is because during the Industrial Revolution, a lot of products were no longer made by hand, but with the help of machines. There are a lot less people needed to create a lot more products. Where you first needed 100 people to create about 50 pieces of clothing, you now only need 20 people to work the machines, which made 150 pieces of clothing. Because of this, there was a lot of unemployment in England. People lose their paying jobs because of the arrival of machines and factories. The second reason is that the factory owners wanted to earn their money back as fast as possible. You can probably imagine that they had to invest a lot of money to even start their first factory or to have all these fancy, expensive machines. And they wanted to have the money back as fast as possible. They also wanted to make as much profit as possible. The more money, the better. Because they were able to increase production in a very big way, so a lot, with these new machines. They were quite successful with earning a big profit. To keep the cost of the production as low as possible, they could earn even a bigger profit. So they started looking, okay, where can we save some money? So what are the costs of production you really need? For example, the raw materials they could use in the factory to turn into products. They weren't able to get these raw materials for a lower price. The other costs they could use to save money on were the wages of the factory workers. So they could lower those. So they would lower these wages to make a bigger profit. So what they wanted is to spend less money to earn more money. The reason they could lower these wages is because there were a lot of people without a job in the city. So they could hire workers for a very low price and save some money for themselves. Because of the unemployment, the workers would take these jobs even when they got hardly paid. The factory owners could also make the workers work very long days. Because of course they were afraid to say no and lose their job. That's why the factory owners came up with the idea of day and night shifts. So one group of workers would work during the day from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening, and the other group during the night from 6 in the evening till 6 in the morning. This way, the factory owners never had to close their factory, so it was open 24 hours a day. And you couldn't say anything about it, otherwise you were fired, and they could hire a new person right away. They were standing outside in a line, so if you did anything wrong, you were fired straight away. And if you were unemployed, you had no money coming in at all, and you would probably die. That's why the workers couldn't revolt against the factory owners, and they would take whatever job for whatever wages, and they didn't care how long they had to work. So the circumstances were quite bad. Another consequence of the factory workers wanting to keep the wages low is that they hired a lot of children, because you could pay them even less money than the grown-ups, because they were still young. Because of the big unemployment and the low wages, there were a lot of families who needed money. This is why they would send their children to the factory to work, so they would have at least some money to buy some food. Children were also a lot smaller, which made it easier for them to reach under the machines and get to the places where the grown-ups couldn't reach. They would clean up and fix small things. This was very dangerous, and there were a lot of accidents. Because of the long working days, children were often very tired, so their concentration wasn't the best. If you lost your concentration for just a second, you could get stuck in the machine with your arm or leg, and you would probably lose it. When you got stuck and you survived, because there were a lot of them that didn't, and you lost an arm or a leg, you were worth nothing to the factory owner, and they would fire you. They thought it was your own fault and that you should have paid more attention. So imagine, for you guys, it's sometimes even hard to pay your attention for 5 minutes in the lesson. Imagine having a working day of 12 hours, and if you lose your concentration for a second, you lose an arm or leg. The factory owners wouldn't care for you after this, because they were more concerned with earning money, and it would just cost them money to take care of you. This is one of the big problems that the factory workers faced. This was a part of a social issue. This means that the people were more and more aware that because of the arrival of the first machines and factories, there was a huge difference in the social status between people. There was a big difference between poor and rich. A big part of the society was very poor, and only a very small group was really rich, like the factory owners, because of the huge profits they would make, and this went over the back of the factory workers. So they would make more money, and become even more rich or richer, because they would pay them less, and they were poor. So this made the difference even bigger and bigger.